Visualization. It's a broad concept, but it's one that I think most of us get fairly easily. When you close your eyes and you can picture a person, a place, or a specific setting, we are visualizing, right? They talk about it in sports. You're supposed to visualize what you're supposed to, the outcome that you want, whatever the activity is. Well, I'm going to invite you to have a little exercise with visualization. Okay? So if you are willing, please close your eyes, and I'm going to give you some information. I want you to visualize what this might be. If you don't want to, that's okay too. Close your eyes and just listen to this brief description. Ready? "512 rare earth magnets. 16-page starter guide. Metal building base with a splitter card and a carrying case." Okay, you can open your eyes. Anybody dare kind of describe what they envisioned by those words? Something large? Yes?
No. Medium size.
Medium size.
Like
Yeah.
chips.
Chainsaw. There you go. Thanks, Butch. He's with me. Okay. Last week we received a package from Amazon, 85 Main Street, Hingham, Massachusetts, 02043. Perfect address. With a name on it that I was clueless. I had never heard in all the time I've been here, so I was confident it was nobody associated with the church. I just said, what are you trying to do with it? So I Googled the name and thought, if I can find a local address, I'll try to call them up or drop it off or whatever, do a little good deed. Couldn't find the name. Pennsylvania, Ohio, nothing close. And so finally I decided I'll call Amazon, see if they can solve it. Long story short, after I finally explained, right address, no person here by that address, they probably got it. They basically looked it up by the name and they said, that's fine, you can give it away, you can keep it, you can throw it out. Okay.
Important package.
The rare earth magnets are this cube, about 2 times the size of a sugar cube. Okay? Describes specs, whatever specs is, okay? Mashable, smashable, buildable, adult fun. Here go back. Visualization. It's one of the challenges we have when we're reading a text that is referring to how many thousands of years ago. Do we still envision what we're talking about? And in this passage, I think it's particularly important to try at least to envision what's going on. And on the one hand, I think we'll find it's not that hard. Why? Because nothing is new under the sun. At the same time, it's like, really? I don't quite get it. But I think it's important to try to envision. I'm going to be reading through the passage, and as I read through the passage, I'll make comments about it. You can simply listen if you'd like, or if you'd like to turn to the passage, it's in Genesis chapter 37. I think 60, is it, Michael?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Okay, page 60 in our Pew Bible.
The first 28 verses.
So it's a little bit longer, but my point is that as I read through it, just to help you envision, to help fill in some of the details. Genesis 37, beginning in chapter 1. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. Canaan. Simply stated, modern Israel. This section between the Dead Sea at the south, Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, in which direction anyhow? Either that way or, no, it must be this way because I'm reversing. The Mediterranean Sea's over there. The land filled with milk and honey, Canaan. But the land where his father, Isaac, lived And if Isaac lived there, his father before him, Abraham, lived. Because when we draw from this, we remember that Abraham and his brother Lot were in the land of Canaan, the promised land that God invited Abraham and Sarah to go to, and he would make a great nation. And Abraham stayed in the land, and Lot moved to the city. Abraham to Isaac. The traditions continued from Isaac to Jacob. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Two things, I forgot to bring my visual. Where is it? It's the family tree. So go ahead and take a look at your family tree. What we see is Sarah and Abraham, and then on the left side it drops down to Isaac, okay, and Rebekah, and then born to Isaac, Esau and Jacob, twins. One favored by the father, one tricked his father out of his older brother's birthright. Okay? And then under Esau, you see, while Jacob was chosen people, Esau still had a nation built under him, and that would be the Edomites. And then if you go back and you see that Jacob, through the line of Rebekah, goes over to Laban, and then under Laban, his father-in-law, you see Rachel and Leah. Okay, are you following this a little bit? Mm-hmm. It's a little complicated because what we just described was Zilpah and Bilhah. Those are brothers, but they are from handmaidens. Okay, or the brothers, Gad, Asher, Dan, and Naphtali, are all brothers but of the handmaidens. But at the very bottom, numbered, the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? So what he's saying here is that Joseph, a young man of 17, a teenager, the brothers that were of the two handmaidens, he brought a bad report to his dad. Now, does that foster brotherly love? I don't think so. And then furthermore, we see, continuing in verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made him an ornate robe. Now, again, going back, we see something. Jacob, when he left and he sought out his mother's brother, Laban, and then he worked for 7 years for Rachel, who he was attracted to, who he chose. Laban tricked him. No. Leah's not married yet. Leah's older than Rachel, so here on your wedding night, discovers he's got Leah. Okay? So then he's got to work another 7 years. And then he finally gets the wife that he wanted to begin with. But in the meantime, there's all this business of opening wombs, closing wombs, having children, not having children. But ultimately, through Leah and Rachel and through two handmaidens, establishes the 12 tribes of Israel. God's chosen people. That's who we're talking about here. Notice that Joseph was born of a beloved wife, and his brother Benjamin was actually the youngest. Family dynamics. Joseph was loved more than any other son. How many of us have heard the story of Joseph with his coat of what?
Many
colors. Right. We have this picture. We visualize that easily, don't we? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe. The root in the word has to do with palms. Your palms. If you have a robe that is long and drapes down with extra material down to your palms, okay? Maybe picture an academic robe. Visualize. Is that the kind of robe you go out and dig a ditch with? Do a little shepherding with? Maybe plant a garden with? I don't think so. It is a fancy robe. It's a robe that indicates you are favored, and not only that, every time you wear that robe, everybody will know you're my favorite. So Jacob, who tricked his brother out of his birthright, Jacob, whose father-in-law tricked him twice over, Jacob continues the family tradition of setting up problems. Furthermore, I think there's pretty good evidence that Jacob is a bit of a brat. Isn't it? How do we know that? When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word of him. So not only did they hate him because he was favored, but they just stopped and said, I don't care what he does. He can look at me and give me the nicest compliment in the world. I'm not going to ever say anything good about that man, that young man. So that's the dynamic, that's the setting, that's the family dynamic and the setting. And then what does Joseph do? He has a dream. Did he keep the dream to himself? No. Oh, by the way, brothers, let me tell you about my dream. A little bit about dreams. There's a book entitled, and I shared this with the Tuesday Bible study, Dreams, the Forgotten Language of God. And the basic premise of this book is that during the ancient times, when people dreamt, they expected God to communicate through it. And so dream interpretation, which was powerful and an important part of Joseph's life later, which we'll get to next Sunday, was part of the living. So dreams were paid attention to. And so Joseph has this dream, and then he immediately declares it to his brothers. He said, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field. Think of a sickle, cutting perhaps wheat grain, the tall stalks. And they didn't have the twine stored down at the local general store, okay? They didn't go buy twine. They would have used some of the stalks and grabbed a handful of stalks and grabbed a larger handful, and they would have used it to bind it together, and then they'd stack it and let it dry. So you can picture, as you went through and you harvest grain, that you'd have all these stacks all throughout the field. Not all perfectly arranged, not all perfectly the same size, but the image is clear. And so Joseph is describing something that they could see right away. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright. Not sagging over, but now we're standing upright. While your sheaves gathered around my sheaf and bowed down to him. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he said. I think they got the meaning right away. Continuing, dream number 2. Bad enough he shows that dream, but then he has a second dream. He had another dream, and he told his brothers, listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. 12 tribes of Israel, 11 brothers, sun and moon, mother and dad. Aren't I important? When he told his father as well as his brothers, again, a little bit of brat, his father rebuked him. What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I, your brothers, actually come and bow down to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous, but his father kept this matter in mind. Clearly, Joseph continued to exasperate the dynamics within the family with his brothers. Now his brothers had gone and grazed their father's flocks near Shechem, about 50 miles away. And Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I'm going to send you to them. Now, if Joseph had been smart and seasoned, he might think, Dad, are you sure you want me to go and talk to my brothers? You know, I mean, we know there's kind of a family rift right now, right? But not only wasn't he aware enough to think of that, but he said, sure, Dad, I'll go do that. And what did he wear?
The coat.
You got it. And so he went, and he arrived at Shechem, and he found a man as he's kind of wandering around looking for his brothers. And he said, I'm looking for my brothers. Do you know where they've gone? And he goes to Dothan. It's about 15 miles away. This is one of those moments in the Bible, you know, with the economy of words. Why was this included? I don't know, other than about as human as anything. And while Joseph was a brat, at least he knew to ask directions. Okay, it wasn't a good joke. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him at a distance. And before they reached him, they plotted to kill him. There was no doubt about who this man was at a distance wearing this ornate coat. Anger, jealousy. Here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. And then we'll see what comes of his dreams. Human nature. Cause and effect. Orchestrating the outcome. Taking and making a decision to control. Then Reuben, number one down here, born of Leah, the oldest, said, no, let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Just throw him in the cistern here in the wilderness. In other words, let nature take its course. But don't lay a hand on him. And Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to their father. Fast thinking, concerned about family, positioning himself to have favor with his dad. I mean, after all, I just saved your favorite son. We don't know. But what we do know is that it saved Joseph's life. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. By the way, if you didn't get it, the cistern was empty, and the normal purpose was to be filled with water to feed your flocks or give drinks, but it was empty. He's not going to drown, but he's not going to get out. And then it says they sat down and had a meal. Visualize this. They didn't kill him. They tore the robe off his body and they threw him into a dry cistern, intending the next day to just go away and leave him. Cold. They looked up and saw a caravan of Ishlamites from Gilead. You can find Ishlamites as one of the descendants in the network. So virtually all these families are all interconnected. That's the purpose of that handout. Their camels were loaded with spices, with balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay hands on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood. So the brothers agreed. So the Midianite merchants came by. His brothers pulled Joseph from the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who tipped him to Egypt. 20 shekels of silver. About 8 ounces of silver, estimated. About 3 months' wages. Significant amount of money, but not exactly a fortune. Why are we studying this passage? Why am I encouraging you to try to visualize and to feel and have a sense of what the dynamics were as we unpack some of the details and as we read through this passage? Well, first and the most obvious, next week we get to look at Joseph in Egypt and find out why God placed him in Egypt. Because the bottom line purpose of this story was to see that God's plan was much bigger than brothers and jealousy and plotting to kill and saving and selling. God gets Joseph to the right place at the right time to provide for the nation of Israel. Ultimately, further, it will be through Joseph's capacity to interpret dreams that he will be able to realize that calling. What about this passage for this week? What's the significance? I believe, first and foremost, is to gain a glimpse, to get some insight, to understand that this family is the root of the nation of Israel, God's chosen people. Clearly, God did not choose this nation because they were perfect. Ragtime, plotting, deception, tricking, jealousy, anger raising to the point of actually wanting to kill your own brother. Last week I shared that the purpose of preaching was to bring the Word of God to the people of God. For instruction, for direction, encouragement, at times correction, faith formation. When we look at our families and we read this story, we realize there's nothing new under the heavens. Hopefully our families aren't quite as extreme as this family. But you know what? None of us have a perfect family, do we? And the underlying question is not whether our family is good or bad, not whether our family gets in our way, helps us or hinders us. The ultimate question when we look and reflect on our family is, how then shall I live? What would God have me do as I relate to family members, understanding that just like they're not perfect, I'm not perfect. For the natural family, there is nothing new under the heaven. And what qualities do we cultivate within our family? I read of an account of a pastor that reflected on his own family as he was preaching on this passage. And he shared that he had a younger brother. And he was significantly older, so initially he was stronger, faster, more developed. And he loved to taunt his younger brother. He said when he was younger, they'd be outside and he'd tease his younger brother, and then he'd run into the house, slam the door, lock it, and then laugh at his brother through the window. Well, you know what happens with younger brothers? They get bigger, they get faster, they get stronger. And he reported that the escalation got more and more intense to the point where his younger brother threw a crochet ball, pretty hefty, whipped it at his brother and hit him square in the back. That didn't stop him. He said it wasn't until the day that his brother got so angry that he picked up a claw hammer and flung it at his brother and it narrowed his descent. And all of a sudden, the two brothers woke up and said, whoa, this has got to stop. See, what we do in the midst of our family dynamics. Mom likes you more. Maybe. What are you going to do about it? Well, you have an advantage that I don't have. Maybe. How then shall you live? See, whatever the ultimate motivation of Reuben, He did the right thing at the critical moment. He said, wait a second, we can't kill our brother. There's one who's been quoted as saying, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. Right? It's never the wrong time to do the right thing. How then shall we live? You see, it's not about what they're doing, it's about how we live and how we choose to relate to our family, our church family, our neighbors. The brothers hated Joseph. He was favored, he was privileged, they hated him even more. And yet it raises the age-old question, am I my brother's keeper? Talents, gifts, privilege. The world is not always equal. It's just a fact. It's easy to be jealous of somebody. It's easy to be critical of somebody. It's easy to envy. It's easy to covet. That is, to want what somebody else has. But as we looked at last week, as Christians, we're called not to follow the easy, wide path that leads to destruction. We're called to find the narrow path that leads to true life. As I was preparing, I thought of the parable that Jesus offered. The parable of the talents. One person gets 5 talents. The other person gets 2 talents, and the third person 1 talent. The point of this parable at this day, the person who had 5 talents developed 10 talents, and God, the Father, came back, or the owner of the talents came back and said, well done, my good and faithful servant. I'm very pleased with you. And the person who had 2 talents developed 4 talents, and again, the exact same reward. Well done, good for you. You didn't even have as much as the other person started out with. What's fair about that? That's kind of the world, isn't it? Enemies. I recently was talking to a father whose son served in the Special Forces. As reported, he said that his son spoke the following: they're animals. They're not like us. Now, first and foremost, I'm not a soldier. I ultimately have no idea, and I have a very difficult time even beginning to envision what it's like to serve during war. But perspective. I happened to look it up. We are on foreign land. Very likely the enemy that our soldiers are facing are on their homeland. Currently, I checked it out. The Colt M4AL machine gun. 700 to 950 rounds per minute. Just think about that. It's scary, isn't it? It should be scary. And the good news is, I think most of our soldiers serve with honor. I appreciate a soldier that has faced a combatant has to develop something that empowers them to do what they've got to do. But we need to be careful because they are human beings. World War II veteran spoke with me recently. They shared that their main role was to be a sighter for the gunners. He was a military Navy. But at one time, he took to the guns close to the end of their time of service, and he indicated that he shot the guns towards an enemy plane. Whether it was his guns or other guns, the plane was struck. Smoke was coming from the plane, and quote, he was heading towards shore. I think he made it to shore, and I think he was okay. At least I hope he was okay, because after all, I don't have any enemies. (1945, 1944). Still thinking about that as it came up in conversation. These are profound human dynamics. Again, it's difficult to envision, and yet, as human beings, there's nothing new under the heavens. The family tree, God's chosen people, not exactly perfect. Humans are humans. The question, how then shall we live? How then do we live? Especially as members of the family of God. This passage is a reminder that all human beings are interconnected. It's a reminder that out of this context that God chose a nation, and from that nation it went from the nation to sending his son. It said that God so loved the world, the whole world, all people, and that Jesus taught us to love our enemies, pray for those who persecute us, and forgive. As God forgave us, we are called to forgive one another. Visualization. Joseph, he was in the pit. He was sold into slavery. He had no clue what was happening in the next chapter of his life. How did he live? And how are we called to live before God?